What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Favale coming at you with another 2024-2025 NBA season look ahead. We are nearing the end. This is number 26. We are on to the Toronto Raptors. I have the distinct pleasure this year of being joined by Samson Folk of Raptors Republic. Follow him on the Twitter machine. It's at Sam Folk with 2 Ks, so spelled exactly as it sounds, SAMFOLKK. As a quick note, there won't be like a preamble intro. I had to wind up cutting that for certain like quality purposes. So anyone who's a fan of just getting to the point and not hearing that conversation, you only have to hear this intro. We dive right into it after this. Just a quick reminder, as always, go check out the other Lookaheads, bounce around, have a good time with them. They're a lot of work. We've done a really good job this year. I say that every year, but I think they continue to get better and better every year. And that's we owe it all to guests like Samson. And if you haven't already, why haven't you subscribed? Apple, Spotify, YouTube, hit that sub button, turn on post notifications, comments, leave lots and lots of comments on videos, our shorts as well. The likes too, that helps the algorithm love us back and gives us some exposure. So we appreciate that. Ratings and reviews on Apple, even if you're not using it, or Spotify as well, those go a long way. If you've done all those things, join our Discord, continue to tell people about us. And you should join our Discord because we are going to run our over-under competition. I'll be putting out the doc for everyone to fill out for that in Discord probably later this weekend. We're recording this is releasing on Friday, October 11th. So join our Discord. You can be a part of that. There's a lot of great discussions that happen in there as well. That's enough out of me, though. Let's get to a boatload of Toronto Raptors talk in advance of the 24-25 NBA regular season with the one, the only Mr. Samson Folk. Let's start here with the Raptors. What did you make of how they went about their offseason, where it was just basically about talent retention?
I think it made sense. I think, especially when you consider, like, we're a long way from Masai Ujiri saying, believe in this city, believe in yourselves. After Kawhi left, free agents didn't start pouring in because the Raptors had won a championship. The vaunted G League pipeline that they had built crumbled. Is a Musk pipeline, as it were, or something like that. I mean, things didn't pan out the way that they thought they would. So it makes sense. Like, you trade for Emmanuel quickly, you have to retain him. You get guys in-house, even if you're overpaying relative to the market or whatever it might be, counting numbers. You have to retain guys. You have to keep talent on the roster. And also, I thought, like, getting in Davion Mitchell, especially, we'll get more into this, but with his success playing off of Fox and Sabonis in those more limited minutes, I think you could probably act, maybe there's a facsimile there between Quickly and Scottie. Maybe there's room for that to work out. You get a couple extra tries at guys in the second round. They're trying to build it back up after they didn't get to for a few years. So retain the talent, see what happens, play some good basketball once everyone's healthy, and we'll see where it goes.
I know they're banged up even by like the preseason injury inundations that we've been hit with. That's super unfortunate. You've mentioned they're pretty clearly building back up. I think everyone agrees that they're rebuilding, but they're fascinating to me from the perspective of most teams that are kind of beginning or in the early middle stages of a rebuild don't have all these guys that have agreed to their second contracts, starting their second contracts, maybe on their third contracts. What, if anything, or how, if in any way, do you think that impacts their direction at all? Does it increase the likelihood that they're trying to make this more of like an accelerated build? Am I just reading too much in to the contract situation? Could they also, I framed it, they seem like they're built to react to how good they are or aren't, more so than like, oh, we're proactively heading down this path.
Bang on. I think built to react to what they are. They don't know what they are. And, in years past, they've used the term, give these guys a platform. It was something that, Masai and Bobby would say about Kyle and DeMar. And famously, Kyle and DeMar had signed onto their second contracts too before that team really took off. That team was an older team relative. Now, of course, it's not all the same because Kyle Lowry was famously like the most underpaid elite guard of his 10 years where he was incredible, where he was giving you roughly all NBA impact year in and year out. The Raptors have not struck that same gold mine here, but they've built a team where they retain the talent. They can't lose it, especially after you look at like what was happening with OG and Pascal towards the end of their contracts. Everybody started looking and wondering like, oh boy. And especially with Pascal, maybe things didn't come back in a very great way. Like, we didn't get a good trade out of this. It wasn't the best scenario for us. So keep guys on contract, believe in the guys. give them a coach who believes in them, give them a young team, give them from the front office, not that much pressure. Just see what happens. If Scottie is an out and out superstar, things get pretty simple. If RJ Barrett is a 22-6-4 on 61% true shooting guy, that's pretty good. You can work on defense. You can learn how to hide them. If Emmanuel quickly gets up over 8 3-point attempts per game, lets it gun, if the extra probe dribble in the lane sticks around when games are a little bit more tense, these things can project well. And of course, there's young guys on the roster too who have yet to prove themselves, who pick any number you want. Maybe a couple of those guys hit. I guess we'll see.
This question, because I know this is actually your first look ahead that you've done with us, but I dictate too much of the terms of this podcast. So I've been asking everyone, and this team fascinates me from this perspective because I don't know what your answer is going to be. And I pride myself in kind of like being able to telegraph what the answer is going to be. What is the Raptors' biggest storyline that you're going to be tracking throughout this season?
So I think initially, when I'm going to cheat, I'm going to talk myself into the answer, and I'll give small answers until I figure it out. So I think the initial first one is like the 5th starter, because they pay a lot for their starting lineup. Jakob Poeltl has a full contract, a full fat contract. Emmanuel quickly, full fat contract. RJ Barrett, full fat contract. Scottie Barnes, not yet. It's like 10.5 this year, but it becomes full fat contract. It's signed. You sealed, delivered. Gradey, Davion, Ochai. It leans one way if you want to be future facing. But Gradey, and I've watched camp. I was in Montreal with them. I watched the preseason game. There's a lot of things that have been going well for him. And his teammates are lauding his effort. But the defense is not really there yet. So there's things. You could go another way. That's the first thing. But the overall storyline is, I think, similar to what a lot of superstars, not stars, superstars go through, is year 3, year 4, you start seeing how far Sisyphus can push the boulder up the hill. And that's kind of what I'm focusing on, because I think Scottie determines the ceiling of this team.
Right.
Because you look at it like RJ, Emmanuel, you look at Gradey, the guys who are considered have higher potential on this team. Which of those guys could take the number 1 spot? None, really. And I hate doing the number 1, number 2, number 3 thing, but which of them could take the number 2 spot? That's also pretty murky.
Yeah.
So Scottie solidifying that ceiling is like, okay, we have a 1 or we have a 2, and then we can build out from there. Easy peasy. That has to be determined. That helps set the ceiling and the floor of this team, and it's by far the most important thing that can keep happening, because stars are important in the NBA, as it turns out.
You know, I haven't given that much thought, because I just assume I try to find, first of all, I try to find synonyms so I don't have to use, the best player on the best team. Like the guiding light for this rebuild feels like it's clearly Scottie Barnes. I haven't really thought about, well, do they have the number 2 in place? And so if I'm forcing you to choose, do you, one, think that they do potentially have the second best player on the next really good iteration of the Raptors? And if they do, is it more likely to be RJ Barrett or Emmanuel quickly? Is there a dark horse in there? We're not talking. Is Jamal Shead just coming in hot?
Jamal Shead is coming in hot, but not for the second best player on the team. I think I go against the grain here, because everybody was really excited for IQ right after the trade, and I held on to the RJ thing, and it went really well. And IQ, the defense didn't really come out in the wash. That everyone, ooh, he's clever off ball. I don't care if anybody ever tells me again that a guard is like a clever off ball guy. I don't care anymore. It doesn't. I feel like that people just say that hoping that you haven't watched the guard, and that
So why are you anti Shea Gilgeous-Alexander? Is this like, are we unloading it?
Because Shea does a lot of other things. He scores 30 points per game. He can be overrated on defense. That's fine. Or underrated. It doesn't matter. But IQ, the defense didn't come out in the wash. The lower pickup point on the jumper, the slower release, the want to always go right into a jumper. I think that kind of stuff limited his ability to scale. We'll see if he's able to overcome that stuff. But RJ just started scaling. Like he climbed the wall. He was like, yep, I'm first man over. Boom. He went for it. And RJ, I think there's a lot of stuff that he can clean up, and I think there's still a lot of stuff he can add to his game. And he has a willingness, I wrote this in the piece where I talked about his cutting, to punch the A gap like a fullback. And I love his willingness to get in there. And it's kind of like that power forward thing where so many power forwards of the past who used to chip in like 12 or 14 points a game just by being gritty, being in the right spot, and being comfortable with physicality. RJ kind of does that from the 2 or the 3. So he finds his way to impact, and they have to figure out how to make it easier on the other side of the floor for him. But Emmanuel wasn't good either. So I think, very long answer, I think RJ is more likely to be the 2. However, I think it's more likely that RJ is a 3.
So then your assumption would be like this team probably has to go out and find
at some point.
Yeah.
At some point. So if guiding light is 1, what is the synonym for 2? Supplementary light.
Yeah, supplementary light, the backdrop. I have no idea.
Yes,
We're gonna need a synonym for the number 2.
Mm.
Let's stick with RJ. So we talked a lot about the stuff he was doing, and I think being in the Raptors motion offense, being in transition more, that helped him a ton. Following all the way to the basket on his actual drives. Some of the stuff came down a little bit of the efficiency from the perimeter after we recorded. What are you specifically looking at to see? I mean, at this point, it does feel, well, actually, let me start here. At this point, it kind of feels like the finishing stuff just might be real.
It's so real, man.
Okay.
It's, and egg on my face if it's not, but I think it's real. I watched, after he came over, I had watched a decent amount of RJ in New York, and then I watched more RJ in New York. There's a lot of tough finishes there, but also he flubbed a lot of stuff. And I don't know if that became like a mental thing. I don't know what happens, but he's very strong and he's very good with his left hand. And so I kind of wanted to dispel the notion that he only goes left because he actually is a more efficient and more voluminous driver going right. Now he still finishes left, but he's so strong at his position. He's so willing to, box guys out of his space and go up there uncontested. And if you're not over 6'8" and 230 pounds, RJ probably can, evacuate you from the space and finish. And also, I wrote about it at the end of February, the higher pass percentage that he's introduced into his drives. When I looked at how many advantage assists he gave as a Raptor versus a Knick, the percentage it almost doubled. It was like 26% versus 44%. He was making better reads. He's a little bit more patient in the lane. He's a little bit more confident finishing. I think all that stuff manifested and it sticks around. And the piece I just wrote yesterday about his cutting, he was cutting twice as often in Toronto as he was in New York. He scored almost on 3 times as many cuts in Toronto as he did in New York in just 6 more games. So this kind of stuff, the motion offense, the blade cuts, the 45s, we talked about Caitlin. The Pacers always use funky guys in the dunker spot guards. RJ is a pretty nifty dunker spot guy. There's a lot of stuff trending in the right direction for him to score the ball. Darko the other day told me I could go a full quarter, wouldn't drop a single play for RJ. He'll figure it out. It's good stuff.
Just night and day from the stuff you would think about him while he was in New York. I do think a lot of it had to do with personnel overlap and spacing redundancies, but it's wild to hear Darko say something like that where it felt complete opposite in New York.
They don't run a lot of stuff for RJ. A lot of it is him just being garbage man. And usually garbage man isn't the 2 or the 3 as far as the position on the court. But I mean, you pick up garbage,
Glittery sanitation worker. Maybe that's what we refer to the number 2.
Yes.
Sticking with then synonyms, rather than asking you where you think he should develop, what's the next frontier look like for him, or that you'll be looking at, can he add this or can he polish this off a little bit more?
It is defense. Now, RJ has a little bit more size than, I was maybe a bit of hypocrisy here where I'm saying, I don't care if a point guard is clever off ball. I care if RJ is clever off ball because he's strong enough to stick in against seals and post switches. And he's also not that fleet of foot, at least going sideways and letting the barn door swing open and stuff like that. So being able to be gritty in the lower half of the defense with digs, with being attentive, with making sure that You're efficient in your steps to dig. You're efficient in your steps to get back out to the corner. And it's like, I know the Raptors haven't fully adopted the run and stop type of closeout. They like the stutter stop closeout still, but there's a lot of stuff that he can clean up on that end, and how the Raptors use him to kind of protect against his foot speed weaknesses on the perimeter, and how he, I guess, takes to their new approach. That kind of stuff I'm really interested in. I think that is the next frontier for RJ Barrett, is becoming survivable on defense.
Emmanuel, quickly, you mentioned him already. Where do you sort of land with his playmaking? I thought there were a lot of nice flashes in Toronto, and when Jakob Poeltl was healthy, that certainly helped. And I think even just having guys where you didn't see as much of this in New York, it felt like anecdotally, of just even lifting or just kind of moving off the ball. It served him well in terms of his options and maybe simplifying or just making more available reads for him. But they paid him, forget about the number 2 stuff. They paid him like someone who should probably be able to run the offense like an actual floor general. Do you see that level of playmaker in him, and what still kind of needs to happen for him to get there?
Yeah, he's paid like an all-star guard, and it starts this year. And, you know, it's not the most fun way to look at basketball, but it's a consideration. As far as being like a de facto floor general, I actually don't think he's fully that guy. I do think what you said, that he showed more playmaking chops in Toronto than he did in New York. There's some, like, the assist to usage stuff didn't go crazy, but the assist percentage went up and the assist numbers went up. The Raptors are a little bit of an assist farm, though. They had over 25 assists in like 30 straight games or something like that. They broke a franchise record, and they were terrible. This is a bad team. They lost 16 games in a row. But Emmanuel, I think, did a much better job of getting deeper into the lane with a live dribble. I think that having Jakob Poeltl Jakob Poeltl is a very underrated pick and roll big man. He's one of, I think, the best in the league at laying down the screen, providing the simplest pass, which isn't the lob, which isn't the over the top. It's the pocket pass. Most guards have it in their bag, and especially for Emmanuel going right, the pocket pass is very easy. Poeltl, the catch, the twist, and the pivot through and the step through, he finishes like 78% of his field goals there. You're going to get your numbers juiced. That's great for Emmanuel. As far as like really manipulating the defense far into different spaces, I don't know if he'll do that, and I don't know if he can do it like possession in, possession out. But I think the cool thing is Emmanuel is a tremendous catch and shoot operator. He moves off the ball. The Raptors run a ton of shallow double drags for Scottie Barnes running a pick and roll, and guess who the shallow cut is so many times? Emmanuel quickly going out to the left, right? So he is not he's not a de facto floor general. I do think, however, though, he does enough floor generaling, he does enough light guiding that he can also step into a lot of supplementary lighting for Scottie Barnes, and he can do so very easily in a way that not every point guard can.
You also mentioned him taking the extra dribble, getting deeper into the paint. Is there, like, do you see the ability for that to go even further? Like, do the Raptors want to have the spacing to encourage it if he's going to be on the ball to start those possessions? Because I think his rim frequency in Toronto was 18%, which was a pretty big uptick from where he was in New York, which I think was 12% last season. But that's still not like a super high number. And he does have a tendency, you know, it's fine when the floater's kind of fallen, but like the kind of bail out on a dime and chuck up the floaters when you're in the lane, that's not necessarily always going to fly. And so is there like, do you see the potential for that sort of supplementary rim pressure to continue to uptick?
I think it can a little bit, but as far as like becoming a big time rim pressure guard, no, I don't think so. I think that he's not able to finish through contact very well. And when I say contact, I'm not saying like free throws and one. I'm saying when the defense is legal, when they've beaten you to the spot, and you either have to like kind of blow through somebody's shoulder to get around them and keep your line drive straight. Don't let it widen your angle so that you step wide and so that, you know, the weak side rim protector is actually on you by the time. You have to be able to blow through that shoulder and stay on a straight line, or go up and bounce off a guy and finish in air. Like that part of his game is not super strong. And you see that represented in a lot of the best rim pressure guards. He is, however, like he got better at it over his time with the Raptors, and it was something that a lot of people were paying attention to. Like, as you said, 18% versus 12 or 13%. This is still low rim frequency, even for a guard, right?
Right.
And he still like is around 30% in the short mid range, which is high frequency, even for a guard. Being the free throw line is something that I thought he got a very friendly whistle in Toronto. I wonder how it goes over a full season, if he'll get the same trips to the line. I'll be interested. But, there's something to say about like at some point you are the player you are. Before he made the trip from New York to Toronto, he was fourth in the NBA in floaters made, and he shot like 59% on them in half the season in New York. That's great. Like 59% is good on floaters. It's
Yeah.
not really great on layups. Typically you want to be over 60%, but he has a talent. He has to be able to use it. I think the most important thing is probably how he play makes out of those packages rather than expecting like big rim pressure guy. But we're splitting hairs a little bit, There's things he can improve on for sure, but he is a slight guard.
Yeah. You mentioned that you thought he got a friendly whistle in Toronto, which is kind of funny because his entry there kind of coincided with the game shifting and how it was called. And I don't know if it's confirmation, but it seems like, okay, that's going to continue to be an emphasis moving forward. Is he someone then, if you're worried about his ability to finish through contact, could that adversely impact him in ways that we haven't really seen manifest then yet if you thought he got a friendly whistle last year?
I think if more physical defense is introduced or allowed, that Emmanuel Quickly is one of the players who will struggle with that. Like, and that doesn't mean he's not a good player. Emmanuel Quickly is good. He has a lot of really great NBA level talents, but physicality is something he struggles with. It's why I'm sure you've seen him in the playoffs. Guards who struggle with physicality typically they get leaned on during the playoffs, and you typically see a big dip. Guys who are a little bit more reliant on free throws, guys who are a little bit more reliant on not having guys kind of like get into the hips, get into the waist. I think it would have an adverse effect on him. He'd have to figure out counters. Maybe that means he shifts if that sticks around in the NBA. I don't know. The reffing kind of goes everywhere sometimes. If that sticks around, maybe that means he transitions more into off-ball stuff for the long-term look of his future. And maybe that means that Scottie Barnes, who is extremely physical, gets to be extremely physical towards his defenders. And maybe that means he can take on more of the like initiator stuff. I'm not exactly sure, but I do think that would dampen a little bit of his, let's say, creation stuff.
And what have you recalibrated his defense to? Like, what is your expectation or hope for what he can turn into defensively for this team then?
Geez, that's a tough question because we haven't seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was bad. It was really bad in Toronto. Every time he played a good point guard, it went really poorly. He wasn't sticky. He didn't offer much resistance. And the off-ball stuff, when the defense was already bad and the Raptors were a bad team, it doesn't really ask players to like be the best, be the best off-ball defender you can be. Like, guys are less engaged, we'll be honest. That's why the G League looks the way it does. Like, ball pressure guards look great in the G League because, that's one thing you can control. But the team defense, the scheme at large is just like cobbled together. The Raptors were half a G League team for lots of last year. So there's lots I'm waiting to see from Quickly. It wouldn't surprise me if he was like an above average guard defender, but only slightly. But if that happened, I would be overjoyed. I'd be like, oh, this is great. This is awesome. I wouldn't be like, wow, I never saw this coming. But I think it's more likely he probably is around average or below average because he really does have, I saw him struggle a ton at the point of attack. Now there's room for him to be really good, not toothless, but toothful, on digs. And he, wingspan plus size. He's not a short guard either, especially at the point guard position. So to be in lanes, to make sure that passes out to the corner or the wing have more arc on them, they go less direct. Like that kind of stuff can always be there. You can deter, but really the point of attack, there so much remains to be seen.
I think he can actually be a lot better And I'm wondering if you mentioned the talent around him, if the Raptors are fielding a G League roster. There's also, and you would know more about this, just being being more in tune with the games in general. Having that midseason switch, like going from one team to the other, I don't know how much that impacts your ability to then like grasp everything that's happening. And the stuff, a lot of times when I would see him in Toronto where he's getting burned, it felt like this wasn't that stark. But you remember the Chris Paul meme where like Steph Curry has him on Twister? It just felt like Immanuel quickly was operating from his back heels too much, like he was almost ready to fall over in space lot. And I'm just wondering if better talent around him for sure, but if just more familiarity with the Raptors in general, if you see, I hate using the phrase locked. We're just trying to come up with synonyms for everything, but like
Sure.
a more effective Emmanuel, like a more consistent version of Emmanuel quickly this year, because I never watched him in New York, not once. I maybe saw like 3 seconds of his games, but I really do think like that is someone who I always looked at, and he has the aesthetics like, oh, it wasn't even the off ball stuff. It felt like he was feisty and that he would be able to hold his own in a lot of the point of attack situations, or even if it came to navigating screens. So I would still hold out hope that I think he could be better than what you were seeing in Toronto. But he is like, I wouldn't describe him necessarily as super strong. It's like he has good
Yeah.
size, and we've already kind of mentioned it. So that's certainly a concern too.
Yeah. Well, if you're worried about him, or if you think being on his heels was a problem, the Raptors at Media Day, Darko has talked about it a lot. They have DJ Carton, who is a great ball pressure guard at the G League level, remains to be seen at NBA level. Jamal Shead, who is like a prodigious ball pressure guard at the collegiate level, and Davion Mitchell, who is one of the best ball pressure guards in the NBA. The Raptors said that the most important defender on the floor for them is no longer the low man. It is now the ball pressure, the guy who is applying it. They're making a big change, I think. So Emmanuel, as the head of the snake defensively, should be on his toes. So hopefully being feisty and fleet of foot, hopefully that works out. I mean, if he was good defensively, it changes everything. Like it really does. But if he's bad defensively, it's like, well, damn, this is tough to work around now because Emmanuel, RJ, Gradey, that's like one of those guys has to guard.
I do recognize that there could be kind of the played in New York inflation here, whereas they do one thing okay, and
Yeah,
it's the
he's
fact
in the
that
garden, man.
yeah,
He's gritty. He's intense.
like I don't think anyone ever thought he was an all defense defender league wide, but I'm sure there were like Knicks fans or media that would have made the case. I even think RJ Barrett was probably his best defensive season. I think was as a sophomore, and he was good, and it was portrayed. And I'm not calling out Knicks fans or anything, but it was portrayed nationally as like spectacular, and it
He's a
almost takes away from it.
lockdown.
Yeah. Yeah. You did say something. I didn't send this to you in the outline. It's not even necessarily Raptors related. Are you noticing a change at all in how NBA teams seem to maybe be building their defenses, where it feels like typically it's you kind of start from the inside out as your base? And it does feel like when you look at certain teams, the Pelicans could be one, even maybe the Rockets last year. It feels like teams might be more apt to build it from the outside in, where you're talking about using the head of the snake or like ball pressure more so than like trying to rely on like not even funneling towards rim protection, but necessarily building around. And it doesn't have to be an elite big man, but we see so many defenses try to build their bases around bigs in general.
Yeah, I think the reason for that might be that the best offensive players, like for a long time, there was a certain level of speed and influence a defense could put onto a player driving downhill. And players driving downhill, it used to be pretty rote. There wasn't like that creative playmaking or scoring out of it. Like guys wanted to get to their spots, they know what it looked like, and if you see this counter, you get it. Now you have like on average at the point of attack, like a guy who's like 6'4" with a 6'8" wingspan, blindingly quick, really, can I curse?
Yeah.
Really gives a shit on defense. And not only do you have faster bigs and bigs who have their head on a swivel for lob opportunities, for laydowns, all that kind of stuff, but the rear view contests and the way that teams play the lanes now is they're really trying to catch up to guys who operate just on a different cerebral level going downhill. And so, and this is kind of a Celtics thing, if guys are so goddamn good at once they get past their first defender, like it's insane to me how many guys turn 5-on-4s into like 65% field goal. They just like it's there every time. They're like, okay, Derek White, Drew Holiday, Jaylen Brown, Jason, like, let's just fucking form the wall, make sure they can't get to that point. Like, we have to keep the guy in play. And that requires more of that outside in building. And that's why, and Jason Tatum's rebounding is really underrated, so they can get away with him at the 4. But, guys are too good at passing now. Guys are just too damn good at passing. So you need to keep them farther away from the basket and hope that they shoot a lot. And I think that might be informing the defensive change. Maybe this, you should ask Caitlin this question. I bet she has a really insightful answer.
I'm happy I got to ask you that, because even the Knicks seem like they're trying to do it, like they're like or at least a facsimile of it. So it's something I've thought about a lot over the past couple months. But you did mention the Raptors defense, and so after playing all that time under Nick Nurse, we're used to seeing just hyper aggression from them. They were definitely more conservative last year, and now you're mentioning that they are talking about kind of making the most important defender the ball pressure guy. So is it fair now we're going to see a more, are they going to try and strike a medium? Like, what's going to be Toronto's defensive identity this year?
God, I don't know. Because you
Okay.
say things. We all say things. Everybody says things. When the Raptors were hyper aggressive, it was before Pascal's defense took like a downturn. It was when OG Anunoby was still, playing very hard on the Raptors, still an all NBA level defender. Fred VanVleet, who had one kind of down year defensively in Toronto, but immediately became like an insane pest once again in Houston. The wonderful, beautiful half season of Precious Achiuwa. I mean, when they played,
by the way, following that half season, that off season, I picked him to win. So I think we're talking the 22 off season, right? Yeah. I picked him to win most improved player in 2022, 2023. Yeah, did not work out so well for me.
We're Precious believers, brother. I still believe in it. There's a lot of latent stuff going on there for Precious, but they had a lot of defensive talent on the roster, and they were just a better team. Now, I don't think they have the same, definitely not on the wing. Wings are important to ball pressure, as it turns out. They don't have the same level of wing defenders, and we probably won't even get to see exactly what they want to do early on because they still have so many injuries. Like RJ is injured, Bruce Brown is injured, Emmanuel Quickly is still nursing his thumb, Jakob Poeltl and RJ both acromioclavicular joints, stressed and strained. We'll see what happens once they're fully healthy, but at the very least, they have Davion Mitchell, Emmanuel Quickly, DJ Carton, Jamal Shead, and Scottie Barnes and Jakob Poeltl on the back line. Ochai is also, it wanes from game to game, but he can have some pretty impressive ball pressure games too. So we'll see how all that shakes out. Yeah, I don't know. Because words are words.
Has Jakob Poeltl at all? I've never been, with the clarification, I've never been a super just like, oh, Jakob Poeltl's like this amazing NBA center. I wasn't thrilled with the contract the Raptors gave him. I didn't think it was backbreaking. Has he become a little underrated on the defensive end at all? I think the raw rim protection numbers are throwing people for a loop because they've slipped over the past couple of seasons. But if you want to dig into numbers and you look at like teams get to the rim less when he's on the court and they shoot worse overall when he's on the court, especially last season. I don't know if it's because the Raptors were just working from such a low baseline, but for the stuff that he's able to do, is it like, what is the actual value of Jakob Poeltl on deep? Like, what is the proper way to evaluate Jakob Poeltl through a defensive lens?
I think that he was overrated defensively for a long time and underrated offensively because for too long, everyone got so goddamn comfortable thinking like, well, if he doesn't shoot, it's not super offense. But Jakob Poeltl is a very good offensive center for greasing the wheels for everything you want to do, for screen setting, for finishing everything around the rim. And you can operate a lot of elbow basketball with him as the hub. The Raptors, they really benefit from what he provides offensively. Defensively, things have slipped. I think some of that is to do with I don't know, you've probably felt it in your own life, a general malaise when you're going through like a patch of life where you're like, ho hum, when you're not playing on like a super good team and Zion is coming down the lane, less impetus to like put your body between the unstoppable force. And I think he does have trouble on the perimeter now more than he used to. And so that, and it's not a whole bunch, but I think he has a little bit more trouble on the perimeter than he used to. I mean, the open practice I just went to at McGill University, Kelly Olynyk took him for all he was worth. Like, Jakob had a lot of trouble with this point forward Kelly Olynyk, who was 33 and was shredding him. But his rim protection stuff I still think is good. And big bodies are big bodies. Big bodies good in basketball, I think.
In theory, if there's going to be a boatload of more ball pressure in front of him, how does that impact his job then defensively for Toronto? Doesn't that, in theory, could leave him kind of needing to do too much on the back line then?
You're asking the right question. And I'll tell you, Dan, this is the exact question I asked Jakob, and he refused to answer it. I said, hey, we're talking about a whole bunch of ball pressure. How does that impact you, Jakob? And he was like, it doesn't really. And I was like, surely that can't be true. and he did the thing where players are like, well, it depends on schemes. I'm like, I know it depends on schemes, yeah, but I'd love for you to like go a little bit deeper on this for me. But he refused. I think it will require him. It depends on how, especially since their ball pressure guards will be smaller a lot of the time. You know, crowding from behind won't be as big a thing. I assume Jakob will be stepping up a little higher in the defense.
Okay.
And that might be trouble. But since Scottie, it could effectively turn Scottie into the backline guy a lot more often, is that Jakob is the big man who steps up. Then if he allows the blow by, or if a guy kind of gets around him, they have to widen their drive. That means that Scottie is the low man. He has more time to come over, and that Jakob can trail back into the paint for boxing out, for rebounding, or for lay down passes to guard that kind of stuff. I think he's capable of doing it. I wish I had a quote from him saying this kind of stuff, but they don't have to give us anything, honestly. It just doesn't matter.
Well, what's with these Raptors guys kind of stymieing you? We're talking last year, and I'd read your piece before we recorded that pod about you asking RJ Barrett to kind of like what's changed or how he's changed. He's like, basically, he says, I haven't changed. I'm still RJ or something. What's with they don't want to elaborate for you. What's up with that?
Well, sometimes they do. It's just if you get them on a certain, Jakob never wants to. Like, Jakob never wants to elaborate for me. A lot of players do. And RJ has actually been really good and really great this season to start. We'll see how that kind of shakes up. Scottie will not elaborate anything ever, which is unfortunate because like he'll go do it on Twitch or something. But I'm not digging through a Twitch stream for quotes. I just said, God, I couldn't possibly.
What about Kick? I just heard of Kick. What's Kick? Is he on Kick?
Oh, I think Kick is a hellhole. I think
it makes sense. I didn't even know it existed until a few days ago. So
I'm pretty sure Kick is like the debaucherous streaming site.
All right, well, let's hope Scottie's not on there. Okay. I only saw because there was a social media influencer, because Twitter's a mess now with the algorithm that crashed his McLaren and filmed the whole thing, and he got kicked off Kick for doing it, was the tweet report. I was like, the hell is Kick?
If now this is just a cursory glance into if my brain remembers from passive information. I think Kick is funded by Stake, the crypto casino. And I think they have like so much money because they get kids to gamble. Like I think, wait, but also allegedly, in case I don't know, everything alleged. I don't know well enough. Anyway, we've gone far afield. But anyway, sometimes you get stymied, sometimes you get really good stuff. I'm hoping that this year I get really good stuff. And thank you to Darko, who is usually very forthcoming with me, and I really appreciate Darko for that. But yeah, players don't have to say anything. They don't owe us anything. They just have to be there.
They don't. But I kudos to you and the other people. I say this all the time on the podcast, where I stopped doing on-site work, like him pushing for it, like right around the pandemic. Obviously, I never tried to go back because I hated the logistics and not the politics of it, but having to go through politics, yeah, well, there's politics of it, and I'm not willing to play that game. But so kudos to you for continuing to power through what could be bland answers. Although Jakob, to his credit, I saw him getting the, oh, you can't say the quiet part out loud type thing when he said,
That was great.
We're not attacking the championship. I was like, hell yeah. Like, that's we claim to want candor. Let him say it. I liked it. Sorry to take us on that tangent, but their big man rotation, because we're talking about Jakob, when you look at kind of the primary bigs on this team, they don't have like we're talking about how they might defend. It doesn't seem like they have a type of big man rotation where they could even have a identity that's consistent across the board with Jakob, KO, my guy, Chris Boucher. So what do you sort of make of the big man rotation? Is there one of, I guess if Kelly Olynyk is cooking like, Utah Jazz point center, Kelly Olynyk, he's not going to fall by the wayside, but is there the potential for Chris Boucher to kind of fall out, or like what do we sort of make of that primary Raptors, big rotation?
So this is flex tape. The name Scottie Barnes is crudely drawn over it when he slaps it in front of the big leaking hole and is like, hopefully this works. I think Scottie Barnes does a lot of heavy lifting, and so does Jakob for that big man rotation. Kelly struggled a lot at the Olympics. I was crestfallen by Kelly's performance at the Olympics, to be quite honest with you. He was not good offensively or defensively, and I thought both of those, I thought that context, that environment should benefit his game on both sides of the floor. Maybe he has a really good season, but he was really bad defensively last year. Again, everybody on the Raptors was really bad defensively last year, especially when the team was so injured. So who knows, really? Maybe they find different ways where they can kind of like keep things a little bit more penned in. I'm not exactly sure. Chris Boucher is a positive bench player in the NBA. And
Build he got you. Do it.
Yeah. And he got sat a lot last year. A lot of did not play coach's decision. I gotta be honest, man. You talked about politics. I said politics. There's politics here in the Chris Boucher thing. I don't know anything confidently enough to speak on it, but I can simply point to like the cloud of politics and be like, something happening. Something is and has been happening with Chris Boucher, who is on merit. Like, definitely you have to get minutes, and he just didn't. And this year, it's like you still can't get a quote being like, yeah, Chris is part of the rotation. This guy is definitely good enough to be part of the rotation, and yet we dance around it. So I'm not, again, politics. Chris Boucher, he might not be as good as he once was. And again, it's hard to tell because a bench player on a bad team, things change. A lot of this stuff is contextual, but that's an interesting thing I'm paying attention to. It's like, what the hell is happening with Chris?
So do we need to have some sort of a who gets more minutes this year, Bruno Fernando or Chris Boucher type discussion? I really didn't think we needed to.
It will be Chris.
Okay, good.
But maybe not as big a home run as you think. I don't know. It was so weird last year. We'll see what happens.
He will remain one of my siren songs forever, though. This is either terrible podcasting or fantastic podcasting, but I haven't asked you a specific question yet about Scottie Barnes. Let's return to that synonym. So he didn't really play much after you and I last talked. So anyone should go circle back to that discussion. We basically talked about there was across the board improvement from him. Like, I feel like you seldom see, even at that point in your career, where we expect improvement from a player, such comprehensive improvement. Yep. What is the next frontier for him, though, when you look at where arenas in which he could still improve?
I think the free throw line is I'm writing a piece. I'm going back over all of Scottie's pick and roll possessions, so I can have a more definitive. Because when I looked at him last time, it was not good, and I didn't feel good saying that in the coverage I gave, which was like, hey, things are not going well. He's having trouble beating the push switch. But now, and this is a bit of the piece, is like, well, he's more confident in his handle. He's more patient against switches. He's such a talented passer that when teams kind of wall up at the start and you look to seal and get in behind, that seal drags a guy. He flings it to the corner. If there's any type of hesitation on the defense's half that they kind of want to, okay, we showed aggressively, but we want to get back now. He attacks that more readily. It's led to less switches against him. And in the same way that, Second Spectrum says Scottie went from getting like nonstop short closeouts as a shooter to getting like more and more long closeouts, he affected change in the defense, both as a shooter and as a pick and roll ball handler. And I think the pick and roll, if he's able to keep weaponizing his insanely tremendous passing, then I think that can be such a massive weapon for him. And I still like at the top level, he needs to score the ball better out of the pick and roll. It's still not a great aspect of his game, but I think the pick and roll can be a huge avenue for him to get downhill, to get to the line. And that's as far as like, if you told people by year 4 that Scottie could like be around like 22-9-6, 22-9-7, something like that, I mean, people would have been like, what the hell is going, and all NBA level defense for the, before he got injured and while the team was still competitive, people would be like, what the hell? Did they draft the best guy from the draft class? But that's all well within play. So, that uptick in free throws could get you closer to 23, 24. And I know Julius Randle put up like 25, 10, and 5, and everybody said he wasn't good, which was silly to me. But like that's well within the realm of possibility for Scottie Barnes in these next couple of years. But with more assists and more positive, defensive play and probably a little bit more team-friendly style, he's good. He's great at basketball.
Actually, I had to file, I don't know if it's live yet, a prediction, like bold prediction you actually believe for Bleacher Report. We did a roundtable, and my pick was, I had to do 2. One of them was, I think Scottie's going to clear 25 points and 8 assists this year. I think which for his age, I was looking this up, before your 24th birthday or by your 24th birthday, there's not a whole lot of people that's done it. Luka and Trey have done it a bunch. Then you have Oscar Robertson, Tiny Archibald, and John Morant, and that's it. So he would be the 5th or 6th player to do it. With that being said, I don't know if I have as big a hope of him getting to the line more frequently as you do. I'm really hoping that some of the difference can come like, are we going to get that pull up too to go down at more than the 37, 38% clip where if defenses are going to defend him in the pick and roll a certain way, but I think he can do it. And we saw not that this is a harbinger for that, but the improvement from above the break 3-point shooting last year. I know it dipped a little bit, but he was still close to 35% for the season. And on above the break threes, I'll take it. Also, I think someone on this team just needs to put up assist numbers, and there's him and there's kind of IQ. And I know you said the Raptors are an assist farm, and there's Poeltl, which, by the way, I tend to just discriminate against bigs who aren't Jokic that like to operate against the elbows, apparently.
It's so fake.
Right.
I'm so glad you brought this up. This is it's a pet peeve of mine, Dan. And it trickles down to pickup ball where a guy, the one guy who's like 6'3", he's not a very good player, but he's 6'3", he's on the court. He's like, yeah, give me the ball. And they're always like, they just nod their head like, cut. It is such, oh my God, a big in college or in their first couple of years makes a high-low read. And guess what? A high-low read is not a tough pass to make. And suddenly everyone is like, oh, is this an elite passing big? No. When did we start saying that that's elite passing? That is bottom of the barrel passing. Every big can run a high-low. When did this become like a special part of playmaking? It's so fake, Dan. I'm so glad you brought this up. It is a pet peeve of mine.
So yeah, I feel like he's just going to put up numbers, and I'm wondering if we could see some sort of, I'm glad I'm kind of anecdotally then me being biased against bigs who aren't like superstars that operate at times from like the elbows, that it's not completely unfounded. Then maybe that's what it is. I'm thinking at a lower level, but it's really this high level that's being masked by me not enjoying watching that stuff.
Exactly. Well, everyone thinks it's the passing. It's not the passing. What makes you special at the elbow as a big is your ability to set screens and your ability to bully drive. If you can do both of those things, it doesn't matter if you can make the high-low read or whatever. How many high-low reads come open a game? 3, maybe? How many dribble handoffs can you run that get somebody an edge that filter into a corner 3 or a roll into the lane or a layup? Countless. And bully drives, when it breaks down, this is the Amir Johnson stuff that made him so special. He didn't make high-low passes. There's no pomp and frill in his game. Anyway.
Gradey Dick, who really, we talked about this when you were kind enough to have me on the Raptor show at one point last year, to go from how he started the season to how he finished the season, to then just even like hinting at different layers other than like, look at this value as a shooter. I really try not to watch a ton of preseason because I don't want to like, I just don't want to buy into it. And most of the time you shouldn't. But Samson, this dude, if the one game I saw from him was any indication, like, is he gonna just have like a ton more layers inside the arc and even just more agency with the ball in his hands this year than I was especially ready for?
So you watched him at Kansas probably a little bit, I'm sure.
No, all my
Oh,
college film work is done like a crash course before the draft. I won't
okay.
pretend to watch college basketball.
I'm the exact same way, except when the guy gets drafted. That's the only like I watched a little bit going in. You talk to your scout buddies, say, is this guy good? Is this guy bad? Keep it pretty. People pretend, people lie about
Look,
how much they watch.
let's be honest. I haven't watched an NBA game since like 2012. I have smart people like you on the podcast that I was able to ride the coattails of.
Exactly. Yeah. That's funny. So I tracked all of Gradey's shooting. Like I watched all of his jumpers so I can track it because I thought that the catch and shoot versus pull up was a little bit too simple at NBA. I love it. It's great that they track that, but a pull up can be a catch, one dribble, stand still in transition and make that. It doesn't exactly, it does for the most part, but doesn't exactly correctly belay the info of how difficult a shot was. So I counted all of his movement shots. And once he came back from the G League after he went on the muscle plan, he came back, and over the rest of the season, he was 23 of 51 for 45% on movement threes, sprinting off of pin downs, wheeling off of a flare, sprinting into space, fading. 23 of 51. That's absurd. And from mid-range, 22 of 51. These are those catch, maybe a side pick and roll, throw a head dribble into the middle, go run into it, throw it up. Like, great numbers. Really, really impressive numbers. That agency, and to go back to the original thing, at Kansas, he ran a lot of side pick and rolls, was capable of making the check down pass when two guys came up, was capable of making the mid-range, was comfortable getting into like a little post fade if things slowed down. He made one on Joe Ingles last year. There was some interesting stuff that happened. He has the skill, if he gets his feet past his man, to kind of like make things work. As of right now, he's not that athletic. He's not as strong as he will be when he's like 24. I think Gradey, if he fills out, should be able to like muscle, and because he's a big guard if he plays the two, should be able to like muscle his way to places and shoot and play make out of so many different packages. Right now, he's still having trouble. So the agency, I think he will have. I don't know if the efficiency comes this year. He's still going to get bumped off of places a lot, but you're picking up on something real that the Raptors like putting him in different areas and being like, let's see what you can do. He's a 13th overall pick. He's a lottery pick. The Raptors are not like overflowing with young talent. I like that he has room to try things. He is a streakier shooter than I would have expected, but there's a lot of good stuff happening with Gradey, especially on the offensive end.
I wonder if there's just like he threw a pass in transition, like just one of those passes he wants you to know that he just threw this one-handed bounce pass in transition. And so I'm just like, is there more as kind of this supplementary word of the podcast, like playmaking from him than I would have foreseen?
So that's real. You could also go to my Twitter. Like when I caught the really put like great 3-point to rim push lob over a defender to Jonathan Mobo in their preseason game. He's a pretty damn good passer. The baseline skip he has, the wrap on the baseline out above the break, whether it's a 3-point shooter or a 45 cut, like he's pretty good at that stuff. He's still overwhelmed by the speed and physicality a little bit, but the skill of Gradey Dick's game remains really high, and the work rate, to use a footy term, is also tremendous. He finds spaces. He gets himself in the mix. I have a couple quotes from his shooting that will make it into, or quotes about his cutting that will make it into a piece at some point. We had a good conversation the other day, but Gradey's fun. I hope everything goes well, because if things go well with him, he's a very unique player in the NBA, I think.
Is there something he can do defensively to ensure his minutes don't kind of wax and wane this year?
He said he put on 13 pounds of muscle. Everybody was making fun of him. Like that, he was in the scrum, and Emmanuel Quickly and RJ Barrett were standing outside of it, mocking him openly, which wasn't. They're saying he didn't put on that muscle, but I think he did. He has to be stronger because if you saw this guy's calves, it's like, do you ever? I don't know. I grew up in a small town, Saskatchewan. There was like a farmer who wore rubber boots to work in the field, and his calves were just so massive that they like maxed out the rubber boot entry. He has farmer calves.
All right. Already jealous then.
He has farmer calves. He does not, however, have farmer thighs and farmer upper body. So it's like if you saw a kid who was wearing like 6-pound weights on his feet. I think that's kind of how he moves. His calves are so big. He's not fleet of foot. So he has to get bigger everywhere else to be one of those like strong guards who, as we talked about before with Emmanuel Quickly, kind of like exploding through a guy who's in a legal guarding position. Gradey gets exploded through in legal guarding positions because he's really great at reading where the offense wants to go, beating guys to spots. He's just too frail at this moment in time. And he's not as frail as he once was. He's just left his teenage years. God, young people. Isn't that funny? Eventually you reach an age, you get to say that. But getting stronger will do a lot for Gradey because he reads the game so well. He's just so small right now that his presence does not
act as a
great
deterrent.
Change. Yeah.
What's the sense of where this organization is on Ochai Agbaji? Is there like, I guess the way they want to defend, he makes sense, but you probably want someone who's not, what is he, a 0 level scorer still at this point? So I don't have I liked him. I saw flashes of just like his initial stint in Utah after he was traded from Cleveland. I was like, okay, like I kind of see the theory from here. And ever since then, I haven't understood the theory of Agbaji. And so like, what's the hope for him? What are your general impressions of him so far?
Yeah, I have been, and I like Ochai. Ochai is, I think, a kind man. He's also what is he, the most handsome man in the NBA? He's handsome, man. He's really handsome. Not a good thing for his basketball game that I'm talking about this before that, but I've been pretty hard on his game because, as you say, 0 level scorer. He was 1 for 22 in the short mid range as a Raptor. He shot what, like 24% from three, at 22% from three as a Raptor. This is a guy who was an absolute burner at Kansas. Yeah. 2 straight years, massive volume, great percentages, was a defining feature of that championship run for them and of his game that got him drafted in the lottery. I understand why the Raptors wanted to bet on him because it came with Kelly Olynyk. And they didn't want to have 6 draftees from this year, because they ended up with like 4 or 5, right? Ochai has a pretty good nose for cutting. He gives a shit about setting screens as like a guard / wing. That matters. He understands a seal to find space. All this kind of stuff. He's doing so much of the in-between work. He just didn't finish anything at the rim. He didn't finish anything in the mid-range. And he didn't shoot well from 3. Guess what? You can't be good if you do that. And so the hope is that some of that stuff ends up hitting in the preseason game at the open practice. The cuts he made were rewarded with makes at the rim, even a couple end ones. He's strong. He's very athletic. Hopefully the touch translates to something. And if he starts banging triples like he did at Kansas, then like there's a good 3-and-D player there. And a 3-and-D player who will cut, who will screen, who will provide ball pressure. Now, I didn't find him to be very effective away from the ball, but if he hits shots, which is a big if in the NBA, right? Like that's one of the foundational principles of basketball is like make shots, score the basketball. But if he does, there's so much other good stuff. But right now he's missing like the thing. The thing is what he is missing. But I do like Ochai. It's just been tough.
And he did when Utah blew up their team when he was eventually like traded away at the deadline. Over the latter half of the season, he shot like 36% from three. Not astronomically high, but not in the 20s,
That
which
that was also what I like to do is when you want to like understand a player, go watch their career high in scoring and see what it looks like. And Ochai's career high in scoring was just catch and shoot threes and very easy ones and like transition layups or dunks. And I was like, if this, because he doesn't shoot it well from three, if this is like there's no variation to the game here. And also in Toronto, he got reps to try and create. Bad news Bears. So yeah, he just needs to make shots, man. It sucks. I hope that I'm providing enough nuanced and in-depth analysis around the rest of it, because at the end I'm just saying he has to make shots, which sounds like shitheadery analysis, but it is what it is.
We're 2 degrees away from he needs to want it more. That'll be the next.
Yes, exactly.
So I'm wondering if I could just ask you any early impressions on how they fit with this team, what they do well, what type of role they would play on some of the newcomers / young guys on this team. Let's start with Davion Mitchell, who I've become progressively lower on as time has gone on, but I will acknowledge he does wear opponent skins like a second skin. That's how he wears opponents on defense.
So if a siren song is playing for Chris Boucher, what is the Davion Mitchell situation for you?
What's that? Probably the fail drum. Like it's just kind of starting at an apex and then slowly declines, where it's like, and then it's like a sudden and then into a subtle, oh no. Or the want song. I don't actually know if there's a real name to it, but that's why
the slide whistle.
Yeah, that's the cartoon slide. That's the song that's playing.
Okay, so Davion Mitchell, I just wrote a piece about him today. He like 98th and 97th percentile. I think it was 98th percentile, the lineups where he played next to De'Aaron Fox. 97th percentile when he played next to Fox and Sabonis. When Mitchell is allowed to just vacate all responsibilities on offense and just be like the most annoying, pesty guy on defense, things go well. Only, the Kings wanted a more diverse look. They wanted guys who could do more. And there were guys who merited looks ahead of Davion. And Davion saw not only his responsibilities on offense pared back, which is what they wanted. They're like, well, he doesn't really turn the ball over. He moves the ball. He shot 36% from three. Just like keep everything so simple, dude. And like you watch his 17 assist game, none of it is very inspiring either. Like it's like, what is the diversity of passes being made here? He's never in any of his pick and roll plays, never put more than 1 point per possession in any of his seasons, including passes as well. So this kind of stuff, the creation stuff has never been real. The scoring has never been real. But if it's just you sneak him out onto the floor and just say like, well, let's hope it goes well. That's with the Raptors. We're talking about the fifth starter thing. And RJ acromioclavicular, the AC joint there. I love saying it. There's stuff there. So the Raptors don't get to go into the season, I don't expect, with their starting lineup. But a good closing lineup, potentially, for this team, and maybe there's a candle in the window for Davion after you listen to me say this, is Emmanuel Quickley at the 1, Davion at the 2, RJ at the 3, Scottie at the 4, Jakob at the 5. If Gradey is struggling defensively still, that could be a pretty good closing lineup, I suspect. Now, the Raptors are also a team that will need significant reps and creation from a backup guard, or at least you would think they do. And that is where you start worrying about what it looks like with Davion.
Yeah.
But if his role is, because how do you let a guy close games if his role is so small? If you're like, well, we can play this guy. He just has to be protected by all the best players on the team, and we can't ask him to do too much. How do you go to the other players who are asked to do more and be like, yeah, so this guy gets your minutes, actually? It's a tough thing, but there's hope springs eternal, I've heard, and things can always go better. He has an elite NBA skill, and that is a whole side of the floor. That is meaningful. That is why the candle is in the window. I'm excited to see how it shakes out.
Well, based off what you say, how they want to defend, it would seem like he will play an important role and will actually be impactful
It's
there.
almost like they traded for Davion Mitchell. They drafted
Retro-
Jamal Shead, and they're like, guys, we actually have the best media day talking point because we can really point to two guys. Yeah.
I know he's injured, but I'm still thinking about his gyrating step back in summer league, Jakob Poeltl.
Man, this was what I thought, as we talked about before, taking a cursory glance at prospects and then a deeper one. My cursory glance at Jakob Poeltl was like, oh man, this guy is really, there's no floor. There's a ceiling though. That's when I watch his game, I'm just like, fuck, dude, this guy is boom or bust. Like it's really hard to imagine him just being like an 18-minute per game guard or like a 24-minute per game guard. It's like, man, it's the pedal is on the floor or is not being touched. He gyrating jitterbug stuff. He will shoot anything. He will, and like his step back, he will have his back to the rim and he'll turn in air and shoot it after like running forward. And it's just the way he goes about scoring, and he's slight. It's just like, I'm just going to get shots up. And there's a hope and a prayer that he fills out and that jitteriness can benefit him defensively. The way they talk about him is that he's quite willing. But again, he didn't get to do camp. Acromioclavicular. The AC joint went for him. And so a lot of this is just like summer league where he wasn't very impressive. This is what it looked like, in college. It's like he's getting bumped off his line when he drives. Guys make him take wider routes. It makes shot making more difficult off of drives. It makes you go less into the forward facing, like momentum floater that can also be like the read option into a lob. It makes you take the floater stepping and leaning to the outside where it becomes like a bank or something like that. And help side defenders are way more capable of clearing that off the glass. He took a lot of hard shots.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he will continue to take a lot of hard shots in his career. The thing is, and you could make yourself believe it, he might make a lot of hard shots. And that will allow him to get enough reps so that he can start to make them a little bit easier over time. But God, he makes basketball look difficult, but he also makes it look like kind of amazing sometimes.
There's a chaotic energy to the way he plays, and I felt the same way a little bit about Jalen Tyson of Cleveland. But like when I watch him, I see someone whose role can be scaled to a larger context, and I just don't see that with Jakob. And again, I didn't watch him in college. I'm basing this off like the film work after the draft and then summer league. But I don't see, you're making a face, but I just don't see a way like Jakob picturing him and like, oh, he's thriving as like a complimentary scorer. It's like, no, he needs to be doing this, batshit ridiculous stuff. Otherwise he won't be effective.
I did a podcast with Trey. We talked about Jakob and Jalen Tyson on the same episode. I literally made the exact case you just made.
Did you really?
I said the exact same thing. I was like, Jalen, it's very easy to see role. It's easy to see where he fits. A lot of it makes sense. It was like Jakob, not a lot of it makes sense, but there's a ton of talent, and you wonder what it looks like, how many possessions he gets. We made the exact same point. We just made it like 4 months apart.
That's wild. Yeah. I mean, it was because Jalen Tyson, everyone was talking about what he could do for Cleveland immediately. And everything I knew about him was, well, he does all this on ball work. Like they don't need another Karis LeVert type necessarily if Karis LeVert's already there. And then when I was watching, I was like, well, like I could see him playing a smaller role. Yeah. And I thought maybe summer league was clouding because players in summer league and even in the G League, I think I always have a tough time envisioning if their usage is going to be starkly different in summer league and G League to sometimes how they translate to the NBA. So I don't know if I was running into that with Jakob, where it's like, well, he's not going to be given that, at least I don't think, that type of license in Toronto with some of the shots he was taking in summer league.
Maybe at some point that they're definitely hoping. The hope with Jakob is that he can be a demon out of like dribble handoffs. That like you look at his game and you try and project what it looks like as like a 23, 24-year-old. You're like, oh yeah, this guy should be like, he can bounce to either side of the handoff. He can find a lane. Like he can squirt through a crack, get to like an inside hand lay. He'll shoot whatever the hell. Like the guys who can bounce over the top of a dribble handoff and take the shovel pass and immediately hit a three. Duncan Robinson is one of those guys. It's extremely valuable. We've seen countless guys do it on the Heat. If you have a good dribble handoff big, that Jakob Poeltl is, that Scottie Barnes will probably develop into at some point. Depends if he goes wingy or big man-y. I guess we'll see. Jacoby, you can see him doing that kind of stuff, but like that's not everything. Malik Monk does it, but he's also an awesome pick and roll ball handler. Jacoby is not. There's stuff, but yeah, we're like right on the same track here.
So Jamal Shead would be another rookie on this team, and I guess you can tie this into Jacoby too. Like when they're healthy, how much of a rope or like how much exploration is Toronto going to give these guys in year one?
Jamal is interesting. He looked so good in the preseason game.
I saw the Raptors fans were elated. I saw the clips going around.
He made a difference, and he hardly had to work out of the half court. He just like got steals and pushed the ball, and he was a lot quicker than people anticipated. And so when I talked to Alex Sarr was talking about the speed of the NBA game and getting adjusted to it. And I asked Jamal Shead that question. He was like, no, I had to slow down a little bit because I've been playing Davion Mitchell in practice. And which, there could be some truth to that. He was like, so this turns out Jordan Poole is not as good a defender as Davion Mitchell. We're learning. So he was great in his preseason game. But a lot of it was on broken plays. A lot of it was like push, pace, quick. And the Wizards are not great,
Whoa, breaking.
Yeah. So Jamal, it was great to get excited about him. Louis Zatzman is writing a big piece on Jamal right now. I know Blake is also writing a big piece. There'll be lots of fun Jamal stuff, wherein a lot of fun information about the dog corollary and all of that kind of stuff will come out. Like Jamal he's like the governor. He's the mayor. He's like the best man you've ever seen. Although, maybe politicians. Anyway, so stuff will come out about Jamal and people will be like, this is great. I love this guy. However, he still has to be able to set the table and create in a half-court setting. I don't expect that to be a strong part of his game immediately in the NBA. I think true to the Raptors' form over the past few seasons anyway, the young guys will get looks early on in the year. Then they'll go to the G League for extended time. I think that's what's going to happen with Jamal Shead. But if he exceeds those expectations, something very good is happening. Although I don't know exactly what, because everyone says, well, you just shoot the ball better and suddenly everything works well. But like Davion Mitchell had his best 3-point shooting year and his minutes dipped. And, shooting isn't everything. It's a lot, but there's different places to shoot from on the floor, different places to get to. That's my expectation for Jamal.
Are there any of like the other kind of non-core guys on this team that you'd like to touch upon before I foist you into the lightning round? If you have any Ulrich Chomche takes, I'll be here for them. But anybody else?
Chomche, nothing yet. And the Raptors even are kind of like, yeah, we don't know what the hell. We liked him. And like he went out there for like 2 minutes, got 4 fouls. Speaking
You're
of,
saying he's defensively active. I like it.
This is a thing. Jaren Jackson Jr., Rudy Gobert, these monstrous defenders. What did they lead the league in? What did they lead the league in when they first came in? Foul rate. You gotta want to hit guys to be a good defender. Ulrich Chomche, he meets the moment. He's perfectly fine hitting guys. But Jonathan Mobo, I actually, believe it or not, had the Mobo and the Chomche picks for anybody who wants to label.
Did you?
Yeah.
Like you broke them or you had them like, oh, this is who the Raptors
I was like, I'm hearing things. I could never break something though. Not truly. So Mobo, I think, is very interesting. He was smaller upon arrival to the NBA than as advertised a little bit, and he has struggled immensely. He's been given a lot of shots, but there's some, it's kind of like that Ochai thing. He's bigger than Ochai, And it's funny. I said Ochai's game would be so good if he was like 6'8". I remember saying that last year. And Mobo is like 6'6". And on offense, he plays a lot like Ochai because neither of them can shoot the ball well. And they both seal, screen, and cut really well. And they both struggle to finish at the rim at the NBA level. I wonder if something clicks for Mobo because he's really interesting. Like he has a really great hang dribble and spray pass in transition. He pushes the ball really well. He has a great sense of when to cut. He's a quick jumper. He's just kind of up against it. Like Jason Maxiell, when you watched him battle in the paint, you're like, this is a small guy who is winning on occasion. I hope that Mobo wins more than on occasion, I suppose.
Are you ready to enter the cookie cutter lightning round portion of the look ahead?
Hell yeah.
So is there anything flying under the radar about this team that we haven't discussed that you think deserves more shine?
When healthy, their starting lineup will win a lot of minutes.
They won a lot of minutes together, those four guys, at least together. They won a lot of their minutes together. Well, what few minutes they played, they won those minutes together last year. So that like creates like an interesting duality with their direction, though, to where it's like if you're winning those minutes, you might win more games than you were expecting. And then it's kind of like, do we have to break this up in terms of rotate? Like, that'll be fascinating if they're starting five, whoever they slot in as that fifth starter, they're just like, oh yeah, like we're plus 17 per 100 and they're all healthy and they're playing a bunch together. I'd just be curious, is like, what's the Raptors record 25 games into the season then, if that's what's happening?
And so the start of I don't really like doing schedule analysis, but the start of their season is pretty brutal. They play like really tough games and RJ might not be there for it. So that changes things. Maybe people bring the Ewing theory from New York over to Toronto if they do well. Yeah, I think their starting lineup and again, it should be. It's not a cheap starting lineup. Like everybody there is good and paid well, and they should win minutes, and I think they will.
It's funny when you framed it like that at the top of the podcast. I've thought about it in terms of these guys are on their X number of contracts. When you think about how much they make together, it's not a rebuilding team starting five, really.
No, they're good players who get paid well. They walk around, they're like, we're supposed to be winning. And Masai and Darko are like,
and Jakob's like,
yeah, Jakob's like, I've seen this before. He's like, I've played with DeJounte Murray. I know what this looks like.
So without having seen any games that matter just yet, what do you view as this roster's single biggest need?
Ooh, a wing defender.
Such a weird thing to say about the Raptors. If you like rewind 2 years, we never would have thought we'd be talking about
They
this.
have like 7 of them. No, yeah. 0.
What does when they're at full strength, what does the top 10 rotation look like? Not necessarily we need a minutes breakdown, but like who is playing? You have, I'll go through what I think are locks. Like when you have IQ, RJ, Gradey Dick, doesn't matter when he starts, Scottie Barnes, Jakob Poeltl. And then I have like KO and Davion Mitchell as locks. So I feel like there are 7 locks on this team, and then they could get pretty experimental thereafter.
Yeah. So yeah, IQ, RJ, Gradey, Scottie, Jakob, Kelly is a lock. I think Davion is a lock, unless things go way south. Bruce Brown is a lock if he doesn't get traded. Like they like Bruce. Bruce is really likable, like truly. Like was he openly discussing being traded from the Raptors during the season last year? Yeah, he was. Were the Raptors entertaining a lot of different conversations from the Knicks, for example? Yeah, the 76ers didn't get reported, but they were in there too asking about him. Like there's stuff. We'll see if he's on the team, but he's in there. The rest of it is like there's a lot of names on this roster that like are two ways or G League adjacent, or I think it'll be a revolving door. And I know maybe that's not an exciting thing to say, but I think a lot of guys will get looks at those final positions. Like Brandon Carlson, probably going to see a few games. Jamias Ramsey, probably going to see a few games. Jamison Battle, I don't know. I'm less high on him. Garrett Temple is on the team. He's gonna play some games. They love Garrett. Chris Boucher is gonna play a little bit. Ochai, he's in there, man. Like Ochai is definitely in there. And anything else, you're just looking at like it's like Brandon Carlson, Jemias Ramsey, Jared Rhoden, Jamison Battle, Ulrich Chomche, Jonathan Mobo, Jamal Shead. These names, a lot of them, for people who are listening and aren't Raptors fans, they're probably like, I don't know who that guy is, for a great deal of them. And it's up to them to remember the name, to make sure you do.
This, I don't want to say it's not a compelling question for this team, but you could take it however you want, whether you think they're going to be trying to lose close games or win them. And I know it's to some extent matchup dependent, but what do you think will wind up being their most used crunch time lineup?
Yeah, this is such a good question because it really, I think if they want to win games early on, it means Emmanuel Quickly, Davion Mitchell, RJ Barrett, Scottie Barnes, and Jakob Poeltl. I think by the end of season, it has to be. And if there isn't, you're asking questions. Why isn't it IQ, Gradey, RJ, Scottie, Jakob? And just because like Gradey, he cares on defense, but he still has to catch up on a lot of stuff. I wouldn't delude myself because you can trick yourself on defense pretty fast about guys. Like reputations swing wildly because we don't really have numbers like that. And the numbers that we do have are a little bit superficial. But I think as crazy as
you don't like citing defensive rating as an individual stat? Why not?
That's always funny when people do that. They're like, yeah, did you know Davion Mitchell has 111 defensive rating? Okay.
I've been battling. They're going to catch strays right now. I've been battling, not all Kings fans, but citing DeMar DeRozan's defensive rating as evidence that he's better defensively than Harrison Barnes. That's been one of the battles of the offseason. The argument is not that Harrison Barnes was great, just that you could do more things with him on defense than you could do with DeMar DeRozan, and he didn't get to play with Alex Caruso last year. That's my
that is a thing. This is maybe an RJ Barrett thing too, is that if you score the ball well, it happened with DeMar, it happened with Harden, it happened with like every guy, it happened with Luka, it happens with every guy who scores the ball really well and gets to stay on teams and be featured part, is like eventually they land on a team that is able to protect them on defense. And then suddenly like everybody says they turned a corner. He's like, yeah, he turned a corner at 32. Did he? At 32, he turned
it at 35. Good for him.
It's just like, yeah, they play on a better defensive team, you know. But yeah, anyway, I guess we'll see what happens.
Is there a weirdo, offbeat, funky lineup you would like to see Darko try this year?
Yeah, I want like I would really like to see IQ, Davion, Gradey, RJ, Scottie. Like, what the hell?
Just Scottie at the 5, basically. Yeah, I like it.
Just see what happens.
I want to see what Scottie and Chris Boucher look like with 3 guards. So give me IQ, Jamal Shead, and Davion. You've talked me into Davion Mitchell again. This isn't okay. I don't like this. My priors are being shifted without having watched him extensively in Toronto. That's a lineup I would like to see. I don't know what it would look offensively. I feel like there's a chance it could be a little rough, but I feel like it could cause some havoc defensively, those 5.
Yeah. That's also to go back to an underrated storyline. I think the Raptors score the basketball this year pretty well.
Ooh.
That's a bit of a hot take, I think, but I think they'll score the ball.
You know what? It's the more the better. It's really not. If you believe in what RJ showed last year, and we should all just believe in what Scottie showed last year to me, and you have IQ, who's just a fantastic offensive player. Gradey Dick turned a corner by the end of last season, Samson. Always turning corner before he was 35. Congratulations to him. So like they have a lot, and Jakob Poeltl is one of the better offensive centers, even though people think he's not dynamic because he doesn't shoot threes or free throws all that well for the most part. So like I could see it. I was more focused on like what does this team look like defensively than like offense. Yeah. I could see them being above average for sure.
Defensively, God, I have no idea. There's a lot a lot remains to be seen. Yeah.
As we record this, Samson, their win total is set at 29.5. How many games are they winning this season?
More than that, let's say.
We are in lockstep. We just published our win predictions pods. I think I had them at, it was 33 or 34 is where I ended up with them. I think that they're just I mean, whether they steer, I just don't view them as a team that's necessarily prepared to steer out of winning hard enough, at least at the beginning of the year pre-trade deadline. I thought 29.5 was low. I'm not going to lie.
It is low. They would have cleared that last year really easily, but everything blew up. Like family members of, players died. Everybody who was important got injured. People sat out for extended periods with like soreness, like that, all that kind of stuff. I think north of 29, even though, and honestly, because the start of the season is so difficult, you get to really test, and because RJ will be injured for, I think, at least a portion of it, because he's fully out for the preseason, will be reevaluated at the end of the preseason. So, and like Jacoby being injured, that doesn't affect win totals. When does a rookie affect win totals?
Maybe for other teams, it affects their win totals a little bit, but
maybe for other teams, yes. I think the Raptors, especially starting off maybe in a bit of a hole because of the difficulty of the schedule and RJ not being there, because like it's not like RJ is the greatest player in the world, but it's like who is stepping up behind RJ? That's a big drop. It might be closer to 29 than it should have been, but if they were healthy from the start of the season, I probably wouldn't have any problem going between like 38, 40. But we'll see how that shakes out.
I will say it does feel like one team in the Eastern Conference is going to accidentally on purpose make the play-in tournament. And I'm kind of going between Charlotte and Toronto for mine, because I really do believe that Toronto's rebuilding, but I just look at kind of the top of the roster. I'm like, are they? But I guess but I'm also like, they would need to get off to a really good start to buy into the fact that they're not rebuilding. Their direction, like their real-time direction is so fast. I throw that word around too casually about all the teams, but their real-time direction is so fascinating to me because it just feels so fluid to where it's like, you can look at, give me any team and I could probably tell you like, this is what their like 1 year to 3 year plan is. I can't tell you what the Toronto Raptors 2-month plan is. I don't have it.
They're reactive. This is not exactly like they were proactive in some sense. Proactive team building is, signing Scottie Barnes and kind of believe, and even that wasn't that proactive because that where this team is going, like they made the decision on OG and Pascal pretty late. And that was, I think that's what people objectively thought. And honestly, like there was one offseason where the Raptors didn't talk about trading Pascal. It was after he made All NBA and after they went to the playoffs against the 76ers. He wasn't, but the season before that, they were in talks about the Raptors were trying to move up to number 3 and get one of Mobley or Green. They thought it was a 3-player draft, Mobley, Green, Cade. Scottie fell to them. They thought Scottie was the best of the rest. They took him. You got the best player in the draft, maybe. Hell yeah. But Pascal was talked about in that trade with Cleveland. Pascal has been talked about in trades with a bunch of teams. He was talked about. The package with the Indiana Pacers was Nembhard, Hield, and 2 first-round picks. The Raptors wanted 3. Like a bunch of stuff was happening around Pascal, and they finally pulled the trigger near, well, I guess it was January 19th or something like that. But this is reactive now. Having RJ and him being better than a lot of people thought, maybe the Raptors thought he was this good. I haven't got any word on that yet. Having IQ and giving him $35 million a year is reactive. It's like, okay, we got him in, we got to sign him, retain the talent. Ochai and Kelly is kind of like, hey, what are we doing here? It's they have a lot of picks. They just took guys. They're like, we'll see what happens. They're just looking for stuff to happen. They want stimuli to react to. Gradey and Scottie, I think, is proactive decision making. So much else is kind of like, oh my God, what's going on? We got to make decisions. And some of the best decisions are made on the fly like that. James Dolan, he said no to Kyle Lowry for Iman Shumpert and J.R. Smith.
Oh man.
Reactive. Sometimes the best things happen on the fly, You can plan as much as you want. I've been rewatching Prison Break. You plan as much as you want, but you got to get in the prison to break out of it, and then things change.
Samson, is there anyone related to this team, basketball, NBA at large, I did not ask you about that you would like to discuss before I let you skedaddle?
I think this is what we do every time, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on Chris Boucher before we get out of here.
I don't have any additional thoughts from last time because they didn't play him enough for me to expand upon them. I think that if you're worried about their rim protection, I think Chris Boucher could potentially just be the answer. I think that's in him. That year where he looked like mini unicorn, where he's hitting threes and the rim protection numbers are good. And there's like, you have to appreciate the anarchic energy. It's always going to be in there. And I'm here for it. I don't care if they end well or not. I like closeouts that could potentially end in the 5th row. I respect it.
It's elite. It's a very fun style of basketball. I appreciate it as well.
Samson, are you able just to tell our listeners, watchers, whatever they call themselves, subscribers, where they can find you and all the fantastic work that you do?
You can find me, I guess, on Twitter. This is a video podcast, yeah?
Yeah.
So bottom right, Sam Folk with 2 Ks. And I put all my stuff on Twitter. Also my thoughts. If you've liked me as a person, there's more stuff there. And then raptorsrepublic.com, just for all of the work, podcasting, videos, written work, etc.
Thank you for giving me so much of your time, more than I told you I was going to take up. So I'm super appreciative of that. And as you know by now, I'll be spamming your DMs to come back on in the future. So thanks once again, Samson.
You are the king of podcasting, Dan. Thank you.